Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am joined again by the beautiful Jessianna Saville from the Kidney Nutrition Institute over there in the US. If you haven't listened to our previous podcast, Jessianna and I had a great discussion about polycystic kidney disease and diet and all things polycystic kidney. So she's joining me again today and sharing her time with us, which we're very blessed to have. And we're going to talk about ketoanalogues, and we've just had a little bit of a discussion before we started the recording because it's not something I would profess to be an expert in, because as Jessie has pointed out, we're really looking at prevention, but keto-analog diets are really, really fascinating, and I'll let Jessianna explain it all, but just in later stages of kidney disease, and maybe a tool that might be really useful for some people out there. But Jessianna, welcome, and thank you for joining me again. For people that don't know anything about you, do you want to give them just a quick overview of who you are and what you do and why you are an expert in this field?
Sure. I love coming on here. I say we from our organization, but I love coming on here because I love what a kidney coach is doing on a preventative side of things. But on my background, I'm a renal dietitian by trade, and I got into being on the prevention side rather than the dialysis side after being in dialysis for quite a while. And I just felt like there was more that we could do, and there were a lot of missed opportunities. I felt a little bit frustrated with a system that seemed to be sending people to dialysis rather than helping them stay off of it. And so that's where I got into prevention. And because I really am dogmatic about finding outcomes, as I have been working in this space, I have more and more wanted to find the most aggressive strategies available that are supported by research to help patients out. Because I just believe that people can get results. And so that's that's partially what led me to Kidney Coach, is we were looking for new and different options to explore. And also it's just been great to be able to collaborate and share, what we're doing here and what the research is showing up here and what you guys are doing. And I think that's where we find a lot of good solutions and answers.
Oh, for sure. Collaboration's everything. And we've been so blessed to connect. And I'm loving everything that we're doing with your team, from the case consulting to doing these and having conversations. And now I'm very blessed because you're going to educate me further on keto-analogues and what they are and when we use them. So that's a topic for today. So why don't we start by maybe giving everybody an overview of what keto-analogues are? What that actually means?
Yeah. Okay. So a keto-analog has nothing actually to do with the ketogenic diet. That's probably the number one misconception to separate. Keto-analogues are I like to call them a protein-friendly kidney supplement. What they are is they are a amino acid supplement. So amino acids are the building blocks of protein, but they have the nitrogen group removed from them. And nitrogen is one of the things that's really tough on the kidneys. So they become really usable when you make a dietary protein amount very low. You don't want people to become malnourished because you need amino acids for your hair and your skin and hormones and all sorts of things. You don't want people to become protein malnourished. So you bring the protein in the diet low, and then you add on this keto analog, or this, kidney-friendly protein supplement on top of it that doesn't have some of the damaging parts of protein in it. And that's how it's used. That's what it is, and kind of one of the ways that we use it therapeutically.
So why would we use it? Why would someone want to go on a really low protein diet and then add in the keto analogues? What sort of parts of kidney disease, or when would you suggest that as an intervention for someone?
Sure. I think to understand that, it's good to understand just a little bit of the history and where it came from. It's not actually a very new approach. It was started in 1973 by Dr. Mackenzie Walser at Johns Hopkins. And his theory was, again, we bring the protein really low and add this keto analog on there, that we should be able to keep people off of dialysis. This is something that can help remove, the stress on the kidneys. So it was in the States for a while, and then it kind of fell out of fashion. There were some studies where it didn't look like it was especially effective. And then it wasn't made in the States. And then in 2018, at least here in the United States, That's when it came back here. It was still being used in Europe. A lot of the studies came from like Italy and Portugal because they were still using the product there called Keto Sterile. And so a lot of the research on it is from there. Where they are using a very low protein diet and keto analogs in a lot of the studies is in what's called a conservative management approach. So what that means is that if you have a pretty low GFR, let's say your GFR is like 15 or 20, and you're starting to have that conversation about dialysis in particular, then in some of the studies, what they did instead is they would have people, instead of starting dialysis, they would follow this very aggressive, very low protein diet with the keto analog on top. And they would use that instead of dialysis, until they were, totally did not have any function, but they use that to relieve a lot of the uremic symptoms. So in a nutshell, to carry that, for people that have a late stage kidney disease and they want to be able to sustain kidney function, maybe they are close to transplant and they need a bridge, or maybe they just want to see if they can maintain a lower function a little bit longer. That's when we often will use a very low protein diet with keto analogs, or we'll use it at those later stages. For us, like we say, around a GFR of 20. You can use it at higher stages, but I think you can get a good impact without all the restrictions. At a GFR less than 20, we will use that diet for about 3 to 4 months or so, unless people have just like phenomenal outcomes and they're okay with their lifestyle. We use about 3 to 4 months to kind of give the kidneys, I'd say, a break, and then we'll add in a little bit of protein and take out the keto analogs. And sometimes at that point, people are able to, they'll either stabilize or they'll recover enough function that like dialysis isn't on the table anymore for them.
Amazing. So it is a dietary intervention with some supplementing of basically nitrogen-free protein that maintains kidney function. And it sounds like to me sometimes reboots function because the kidneys have had a break and not a decline. So you've started almost the healing process, or at least bridges a gap for someone to be able to maybe wait for a transplant or do less dialysis or preserve that, or those sort of things. Is that right?
That's a good way to do it. Sometimes I'll think about it in my head. We have what's called roots and rocks. Like when we're looking at how we're going to help people recover function, we say, what are the roots and rocks, right? What are the roots of the disease that we need to address? And then what are the rocks? Meaning, what are the things that can hold people back from getting better, or like heavy in the disease state, or are going to be especially problematic? And protein can really be one of them, not for every single person, but for a lot of people, especially those later stages. Protein's tough for the kidneys and you need it, but you have to be able to get in the right protein zone so that you don't progress too fast.
Yeah. So tell me just quickly, and I don't want to get too biochemical for everyone here, but what is it, how is it that protein's processed through the kidneys, and why is protein so damaging to the kidneys? What is it specifically about protein, and maybe even the nitrate in the amino acid chains that make up protein? What is it in that functionally that changes kidney function or affects it?
I think there's a lot of pieces that play into it. Some of it is because the protein and the amino acids break down into uremic toxins. For example, they would break down into TMAO, and TMAO is, problematic for the gut, and it can be problematic for the kidneys. And so just by nature of amino acids, especially in the animal products, having more protein and the uremic toxins that are produced as those amino acids break down, you get that uremic load. So I think that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is that protein is more acidic, and to gain and improve kidney function, alkalinity is key. Like you want to have a good diet that's alkaline, and most protein can be quite acidic, and so you bring that down and you can really bump up your alkalinity. So there's also that piece as well that really impacts it.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So let's now walk people through what a diet that is based with keto analogues, what would that look like? So say someone's in stage 5, their EGFR's 18, 19, and they're like, okay, this sounds like something that I want to do dialysis. Maybe I can reboot my kidneys, give it a bit of a break while maybe I do some of the, so roots and rocks, which I think is a great thing. So maybe, you know, let's give my kidneys a break while I then do some healing stuff as well. What would that type of diet look like for someone who maybe wants to talk to their nephrologist or dietitian about this?
So a very low protein diet with keto analogs, and I could pull up a picture actually too, if you wanted me to, but a very low protein diet with keto analogs is primarily plant-based. It's not because it has to be 100% plant-based. It's just because plant-based foods are generally lower protein. And so it's when you're like, when 2 or 3 grams ends up making a difference, then you get down to like, like one piece of bread has a gram and another piece of bread has 5 grams. So like, which one do we choose so we can use our protein somewhere else where we want it? But so it's generally plant-based. It has to be one of 2 things. We have a definite preference. So it either has to have a lot of simple sugars in it, or it has to have a lot of fat in it. We're not a big fan of a ton of simple sugars, so we tend to be very fat heavy. But the traditional way it was written was actually pretty sugar heavy. But it has to have a lot of fat because you don't have a lot of protein from protein. I mean, you don't have a lot of calories from protein, and you can't actually get a ton of calories from complex carbohydrates because they're always tied with protein. So it ends up being kind of a really heavy fat diet, and you want to be really smart about which fat sources you're using. But that's the core piece. When we build it out, we start with what are your protein goals, and then what is that going to actually look like for you in a day, and then let's see where we can add in calories. And then we always supplement it with some sort of a multivitamin.
Yeah, that makes sense. So walk me through a day. What would I be typically eating in a day? You say, okay, put me on there. And what sort of protein goals are you looking at? So when you say low protein, we normally say it's 1 gram to 1.5 grams per kilo in Australia of body weight. So say a 60 kilo female would be eating 60 grams to between 60 and 90 grams of protein a day. So what would a keto analog diet look like as far as grams of protein or ounces or whatever it is you measure it in, and then what typically would they be eating in a day? That's not the old school white bread and lollies version.
Yeah. So let me actually just share a actual meal plan that we did with someone to give you an idea. This was kind of a bigger guy. Oh, I can't share my screen. But the protein would be somewhere usually between 20 to 40 grams. Depending on how big the person is. So it's, 20 grams, to put it in perspective for the layperson, is about how much protein you get in like a regular sized chicken breast. But that's all the protein you get in a whole day.
Yes.
So it's pretty tight. But so I pulled up the meal plan on my screen, and an example might be you would do a smoothie in the morning that has a good amount of fat built into it. So we have like a blueberry smoothie, or we have some, we have like an apple baked like bar that someone would do as well. We always include a fat with it because, again, like I'm not a big fan of loading with a lot of sugar on this diet. Then a snack might be maybe some nuts and a good fruit like blueberries again, or apples, or you might do apple with peanut butter, but it would be a plant-based snack with some fat in it. And so we like to use the nuts or nut butters for that. Then lunch might be, this was a really, really simple plan, but we had like a hummus and veggie wrap, and hummus is nice because you can put a lot of extra olive oil with it, and then you can put some olives in there, so you can get a lot of fat in that. Do like a hummus and veggie wrap, or we had just like a simple like peanut butter and jelly sandwich with like carrots, or peanut butter and jelly sandwich with grapes. And then for dinner you might do like we have like a turmeric cauliflower bowl, or we're using either cauliflower, or we do we would prefer to use like a jasmine rice or white rice over a brown rice in this case, because the protein difference is pretty significant. But you do like a curry, or you could do a stir fry, or you could do, this person really liked traditional foods, so we had like a lemon penne pasta, where we would use a lot of good olive oil. So that's what it would look like in a day, plant-based diet, and then we're adding in fat wherever we can, a lot of healthy fats, nuts, avocado, olive oil, that sort of thing.
Nice. And then they take a keto analog, and that is always in a supplement, obviously, that you can buy.
Yeah. So it's either a tablet. Tablets are the most popular. There is a drink. It's not everyone's favorite, but that actually was the first one back on the market. As far as palatability, a lot of people didn't love the drink. But the tablets, it's quite a few tablets, because you're gonna get a protein like amount in there. So it's 3 to 4 tablets with each meal. But that's a typical approach in this case.
Okay. And what typically would you see? What are the outcomes that you're seeing in clinical practice when using this?
So a couple different things that we have seen. So on like some of the more like especially great outcomes that we've seen is, we had one lady who came in, her GFR was around 9. And she was, heading to dialysis. She had such a great supportive family, and they said, we'll do anything. We'll cook for grandma. We'll help her out. And they did. They all pulled together. She followed this approach for about 90 days. She combined it also with acupuncture as well, which we thought was interesting. She added that in later on. And after 90 days, her energy level was like so good. She was back to walking around the mall with her friends and going out to eat. So then we added in a little bit of fish in, because she was really missing that, and took her off the keto analog. But she jumped from 9 to 20, which is a change, right? That's a big change, especially if your GFR is at 9. And that's more than 100% improvement.
Yeah, it's a massive change.
It was a really, really great success story. Some of our other patients, what we've noticed, we had a patient come in, young guy, and his GFR was probably hanging around 12, and it was just like dropping by like a point every couple months. He was already following like a plant-based diet, like a low protein, not very low protein. He's like, I want to make it to transplant. So we utilized this approach, and his foamy urine stopped within a couple of weeks, and he was able to bridge the gap until he had a kidney come available. And then he hopped on that right away and got his transplant, and it ended up working out really good for their family. It stabilized that like slow drop down and some of the symptoms, and he felt just so much better. So
amazing.
We have stories like the first one where people will see a great improvement in kidney function. More often what we'll see is that, especially really low GFRs, like we had GFRs as low as 3. GFR. We'll have people just stabilize. Like they'll just stabilize, and they won't have as many symptoms, and they feel great, and they're getting really well nourished. And so that helps them be able to get to transplant without, suddenly having a lot of swelling, or it having to be urgent, or their potassium going through the roof. So it ends up being a really good bridge while they're working on getting to transplant.
Amazing. Okay. And are there any potential side effects or negative parts to doing this diet?
If you do it wrong, which is common, to be honest, if you just pick a book and try and tackle this, it's often done wrong and people malnourish themselves. It's really common that protein has become the enemy instead of a strategy. And so people are just so scared of anything with protein. And instead of it being like, I have some, it's about what they take out, not what they add in. And people do malnourish themselves. And they rob Peter to pay Paul, and they'll come in, they've lost, 20 pounds or they're feeling awful, or the hair's falling out. because they haven't implemented it correctly. So that's on our side, probably the biggest thing that we see from that approach. The other thing that can happen, because protein sources are mineral dense, right? Whether it's meat or nuts or whatever, protein sources have a lot of minerals.
They do.
We'll see that people will come in with mineral deficiencies. Maybe they got the protein down and they're taking keto analogs, but they forgot about all the other important nutrients that we need. So those are definitely risks.
Okay. And then I just want to touch back to the original book that was made by, it was Dr. Walsh, wasn't it, that wrote the original?
Walser. Walser. I said it. Walser. Yeah, Dr. Mackenzie Walser, Walser. Okay,
so that original book, and that's just in case anybody's like, I'm going to pick up a book and read about this, you will be horrified to read that book. The original one, and you used a great word before, it was a metabolic nightmare, I think, were the terms that you used. So that diet, obviously very low protein with the keto analogues, but it sounds like it was all simple. Well, no, not simple, just really heavily processed carbohydrate sugars.
It was what they took was that old renal diet that was like white bread, white rice, fill in the blanks with marshmallows, like this diet. And it was in the 70s in nutrition. I mean, I remember my nutrition professor saying how they would serve their patients for extra calories butter balls, right? Which is like powdered sugar and butter mixed together. So it's in still that mindset. So if you read that original book and you look through the nutrition plans, it's it's no wonder it was not a long-term diet for a lot of people, because it was pretty, in my mind, like it just looks not very nourishing.
Yeah. And I think we have to remember too that kidney disease is an inflammatory, for the most part, inflammatory based. There seems to be more and more research to suggest there's a metabolic action to it, especially because it's such a side effect of heart disease and diabetes. So those things would exacerbate as we talk about roots and rocks. So you're trying to, put a rock out of place, but then you're totally blowing up one of the major roots, which is the inflammatory pathways. So it sounds like these days there's a much better way of doing it that is caloric dense and still full of veggies and all of those great things. So it's got that healing element with it, plus the unburdened protein load, which is what we're looking for.
Yes. Yeah. You can't just tackle protein in that approach and think that it's going to go well. It's really, we've had a couple of patients, their doctors really like this approach. So they'll say, okay, just eat 30 grams of protein a day. And so they go home, they religiously track it. And it's really, not only is it really terrible for them, and they're really scared. They don't have anything to eat because they don't know what to eat anymore. And like, they feel really stuck. And that's, I think where we have been able to help a lot of people is they'll come in, they want to try this approach. I mean, there is some pretty good research to support it as far as like maintaining kidney function and being, helpful for these later stages of kidney disease. They want to try it, but putting the pieces together and making sure that that you can take the fear out of the food is incredibly helpful for people.
So what I'm hearing is it sounds like it's a really useful approach in those later stages, or if you're waiting for a transplant, or potentially if you're pre-dialysis and you want to maybe slow that journey down, or even to give your kidneys a break and reset. But it's something that really should be done with a qualified renal dietitian that knows how to do it and support you, so it doesn't become something that, rather than being helpful, can be a further hindrance and a stress too, because,
Yeah, I think it's really at least getting yourself set up, because the tendency is always to over restrict where maybe you don't need to. And it can be like, you have protein, then people are worried about potassium, and they're worried about phosphorus, and they're worried about salt, and their list ends up getting really long of what they're taking out and not what they're putting in.
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous point, that we get so fixated on taking out rather than, and putting in is such a much nicer way to deal with things, isn't it, than taking out.
I agree. Yeah.
So what else would you like to say about keto analogues that we haven't covered, or that you think is important information that people may be thinking, okay, well, maybe this is a strategy that's not been discussed with me that maybe I need to look at? What else would you feel like people need to know if this is something that might help them, or about the approach that would be really useful?
So if you're at that later stage of kidney disease and you haven't been given many options, I think one of the number one things would be at least to ask your doctor, right? I'm interested in pursuing a very low protein diet, or I'm interested in using keto analogs. Can you refer me to a dietitian that can help me out with that? That would be probably the first thing. And, some doctors are supportive and some are not, but it is becoming more and more accepted. So there would be that piece, that I think people, go ask for some support on that side of things would be the first thing. And then if you decide to do it on your own, there's been, at least one book I can think of that has become pretty popular on this approach. I do think it's really valuable to have a medical professional look at it, because 100%. I can say across the board, we've seen a lot of people malnourishing themselves. And if you're at that later stage in particular, malnutrition can go really fast because you're a little bit more catabolic when you're at a later stage of kidney disease, and you need to have nutrients to heal and to support all the kidney function you have. And so you don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, even though I think it can really work for a lot of people. One other thing that I'll mention too is that we have noticed that for some of our, especially younger men with a lot of muscle mass, that the dosage of keto analogs that's recommended, sometimes they need to be adjusted up. Like they'll be losing weight really fast and we can't stabilize it until we bring the keto analog dose up, because they're not getting enough protein in. So if you're following this approach and losing weight like crazy, but you feel like you're eating a lot, you might have to talk with someone about what your dosage would be.
Okay. And do you have a particular brand of keto analogs in the States that you use that you think is better quality, or are they all much for muchness because they're just taking nitrogen out of an amino acid?
Yeah, both of the companies that are in the United States right now were started about the same time. Interestingly enough, both of them are run by a guy named Lee, not the same Lee, but they both pay Lee. But both of them have their merits in different ways. We don't have a preference, really, one over the other. Like I said, they both can have some different benefits in different ways. The Albutrix, it actually divides it out by stages. So like if you're going to use it at stage 3 or stage 4 or stage 5, they use a different formulation. The later one has more calcium in it and less magnesium. And then their stage 4 one has more magnesium and less calcium. So sometimes we'll use that just because I like a little bit more magnesium heavy supplement. The other one, Keto-Rena, it has a really good medical oversight, which the other one doesn't seem to have quite as much. But theirs is a great product as well, and we've loved using it. So
okay, great. Okay, so if someone says, and they've listened to this and they're like, yep, I want to do that, and I want to work with Jessianna and her team, where would they find you and how would they get in contact with you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a couple options for them. They can come over to kidneynutritioninstitute.org. They can book a call with one of our dietitians. All our dietitians are trained in this approach and utilizing it, and we have built out so many meal plans over the ages and recipes. It's been nice because we also use ketogenic diets, and the recipes just like flow between the two places really well because we need that extra calories. And then the other place, if you're kind of wanting to bootstrap a little bit, is we have our communities, our community and resource database that is launching in the next couple of weeks, and we have very low protein meal plans that we drop in there for stage 5. And so if people want to kind of follow it from like a meal plan basis, they can utilize that to kind of jumpstart things as well.
Amazing.
They can find that on our website.
Okay, and I'll put all the website and all Jessianna's details, and for her and her team of dietitians, renal specialists, really, in the notes below, so you can contact her if this is something you'd like to do, because I do highly recommend tackling this if this is something for you with the help of a professional, because as Jessianna mentioned, the malnutrition portion of it is such a real thing that could happen if you're not supplementing properly or looking at your minerals and all of those sort of things.
Absolutely. Yep. I think so.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I think it's such a great thing to talk about, especially when people do need that bridge or to reset kidneys and things like that, while, we can implement other strategies that we would probably talk about, the healing part. Is that something you do when you're doing the keto analog diet, is then that you're doing that and then you would put healing on top of that, whether you're looking at their gut or whatever driver it is that you're looking at? Do you tend to?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, that would be our approach. The conventional setting has more adopted like sticking with very low protein diets. But for us, I feel like this is like just the way to relieve a load. But the next step would be, how do we facilitate the next healing process? And I mean, that's where I think it can be really nice to start looking in to the herbal formulations or other things where at that later stage you need some support to like get to get pathways moving again and the body functioning the right way. So for us, that would be another piece that we would add in, depending on how comfortable people are with that.
Yeah,
that's what we would do next. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Jessianna. Well, I really appreciate your time, and it's something great to talk about because we often don't talk about really big, interventions that we can do in the later stages that are, have got lots of research behind them, and then for some people are really very successful. So I really appreciate that. All the information to get in contact with Jessianna and her team are in the notes below. If you want to know more about what we do, head over to www.kidneycoach.com. And if you want to be notified anytime we put out new content, we'll have Jessianna on again and more from her team talking about different amazing things that they do. Make sure you hit subscribe and you'll be notified whenever we put out a new video. Thanks again for listening and being part of the community. And remember, there is hope for kidney disease. And we will see you next time. Thanks, Jessianna. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me come in.
No, awesome. Thank you for coming in. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.